The forest was quiet except for the whisper of wind moving through the tall trees. Leaves shifted in the dim light, shadows dancing across the broken path. The human walked slowly, his boots pressing into the soil, his eyes sharp and alert. He was not looking for company, not in this part of the world where danger lived in every shadow. But then he heard it, a faint sound, softer than the rustle of leaves. Almost like a breath caught in pain, he froze, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. The sound came again, a weak sigh, followed by silence. Step by step he followed it, moving deeper into the trees. There, among the roots of a fallen tree, he saw her, a figure crouched low, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her head bent forward, her skin carried a faint glow. Alien in color and texture, unlike anything human. Her long pale hair fell over her face, hiding her expression. The human's breath caught for a moment. She was young, fragile, and trembling. There was nothing with her, no clothes, no food, no protection. She had nothing but the forest floor beneath her and the heavy silence pressing down on her. Her ears twitched when he stepped closer, her eyes lifting slowly, silver eyes that shone with fear and despair. She flinched back instantly, pressing harder against the tree, her body curling tighter, her lips parted as if to speak. But no sound came, only a broken breath. The human lowered his weapon. Raising his hands slowly to show he meant no harm, he spoke softly, though he knew she would not understand his language. "It's all right," he said, his voice steady, calm. The tone alone carried meaning. She shook her head quickly, her body trembling. Her thin frame looked like it might collapse with even the slightest wind. There were no marks of wealth, no signs of pride or protection. She was nothing but bare survival, yet in her eyes burned something deeper. A story that weighed heavier than her silence. The human crouched low, bringing himself closer to her. Level, he studied her face, the sharp lines of fear mixed with exhaustion. He pulled a small flask from his belt and placed it gently on the ground between them. Then he pushed it slowly toward her. Her gaze followed the movement, her hands tightening around her knees. For long moments she did not move. The human waited, patient, his eyes calm, never rushing her. At last she stretched a trembling hand forward, snatching the flask quickly. She pressed it to her lips and drank, water spilling down her chin. Her shoulders shook as she swallowed, her chest rising fast with each breath. When she finished, she set the flask back down, her eyes flicking toward him with confusion. Why would he help her, when her own people had left her with nothing? She whispered something in her language, the sound weak, heavy with sorrow. The human did not understand, but the pain in her voice was clear. He did not move closer, not yet. He simply sat on the ground, leaving space between them. His presence was steady, unthreatening. She watched him carefully, her arms still wrapped tight around herself. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the forest sounds around them. The girl's breathing slowed, her shoulders easing just slightly. The human could see the struggle in her eyes, the fear of trust against the need for hope. She had nothing, not even the strength to run. But in the quiet of that forest she realized this human had not turned away. The human reached into his pack again, pulling out a piece of ration. He placed it on the ground and nudged it closer with the end of a stick. The girl's eyes darted to the food, her body tensing. Her pride held her back, but her hunger betrayed her. Finally, she snatched it and ate, her hands shaking. When she finished, she looked at him again, her lips parting slightly. Her voice was broken, weak, but she managed one word in her own tongue. It carried the weight of her heart. "Why?" The human did not know her word, but he understood the question in her eyes. He gave no long answer, only a calm expression and a steady tone. "Because you are not nothing," he said quietly. The meaning was lost in words, but not in feeling. Alien girl blinked, her silver eyes glistening with tears she tried to hold back. For so long she had been nothing, no hope, no place, no voice. And now here in the wild, she had been found. Her heart trembled at the thought that maybe, just maybe, this was her second chance. The forest was alive with morning light, golden beams breaking through the tall trees. Bird-like creatures chirped above, their calls echoing through the branches. The human stirred the small fire he had made, its warmth rising into the cool air. Across from him, the alien girl sat curled against a tree, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her silver eyes never left him, wide and cautious. Every move he made seemed to put her on edge, yet she did not flee. Perhaps she was too weak to run, or perhaps curiosity held her in place. Either way, she watched him like prey watching a predator, uncertain if he meant safety or danger. The human set a piece of food down near the flames, breaking it in two. He slid half across the ground toward her and leaned back. She frowned, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Her thin fingers trembled as she reached forward, snatching the food quickly and holding it close. For a long moment she stared at it as though it might vanish. Then she ate in small bites, eyes never leaving him. He did not speak, not wanting to startle her, but when her hands slowed, he tapped his chest and said softly, "Human." She blinked, tilting her head, then tapped her own chest hesitantly, whispering something in her tongue. The word was strange, soft, almost broken, but he understood her name. He repeated the sound as best as he could. Clumsy but sincere, her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise passing through them. No one had spoken her name with such care, not since her family had abandoned her. For a heartbeat, her lips curved faintly, almost a smile, before fear dragged it away. The day stretched on, and the human showed her how to walk the safer paths through the forest. She stumbled often, her body frail, her steps unsteady. Each time she tripped, shame burned in her eyes as if she expected him to laugh. But he never did. He only steadied her and kept moving. It was strange for her, to fail and not be mocked, to fall and not be left behind. When they stopped at a stream, he knelt and filled his flask. He offered it to her, but this time she took it without hesitation. Her hands brushed his for a second, and she pulled back quickly, her cheeks flushing a soft glow. She muttered something under her breath, shaking her head. He could not understand, but her voice carried both gratitude and confusion. That night, as the fire crackled low, she sat closer than before. Though still a careful distance away, her silver eyes reflected the flames. Soft and uncertain, she pointed at the fire, then at him, muttering a word. He shook his head, smiling faintly, and repeated the word he had taught her earlier, strong. She frowned, shaking her head fiercely, pressing her hand to her chest. Her voice rose, sharp and bitter, her words tumbling out fast. Though he did not know her language, he knew the meaning. She was calling herself weak, broken, useless. Her body trembled as anger and sorrow twisted together. Tears gathered at the edges of her eyes, though she tried to hide them. The human waited until her voice fell silent, then spoke again, firm but calm. He pointed at her, then repeated, strong. Her breath hitched, her eyes wide with disbelief. She shook her head again, weaker this time, as though fighting against a truth she wanted, but feared to believe. He did not argue further. He only leaned back, his eyes steady, his voice softer. Strong. The word echoed between them, hanging in the night like a promise. The girl hugged her knees tighter, her heart pounding in her chest. Her lips moved silently, repeating the word without sound, as if testing it against her own shame. She lay down then, curling beneath the blanket he had given her. Her body was small and fragile against the earth, but her mind spun with thoughts she could not quiet. Her family had left her with nothing, stripped her of worth, made her believe she was less than nothing. But this human, this stranger, looked at her and saw something different. He saw strength, even when she could not. Her eyes closed slowly, tears slipping free, yet for the first time in years, she did not cry only from despair. A fragile spark flickered in her chest, faint but real, a question that refused to die. What if she was not what they said she was? And As the fire burned through the night, she whispered the words softly into the darkness. Strong. The forest was alive with the sound of insects and the whisper of leaves. Morning light broke through the tall branches, scattering gold across the ground. The human stirred the fire back to life while the alien girl sat nearby, hugging her knees. Her eyes thoughtful, she no longer looked at him with only fear. Now there was curiosity mixed with caution. For days she had followed him, eating the food he offered, drinking the water he shared. But she had spoken little, only her name, a fragile sound she had given reluctantly. Now her lips parted, her voice trembling, words spilling in fragments of her own tongue. The human could not understand. Yet he listened, his eyes steady, his silence an invitation. Her hands moved as she spoke, tracing shapes in the air, pointing to herself, then to the forest, then pressing her palms against the earth. Her voice cracked as she muttered names, places, memories too heavy to hold. Though the words meant nothing to the human, the story in her face was clear. She had been left behind, abandoned, thrown away like something worthless. She struck her chest with her fist, whispering something bitter, her silver eyes glowing with pain. The human leaned forward, his expression calm, pointing to her and saying the word he always repeated, strong, but she shook her head violently, her hands flying upward as if to throw the word away. Her voice rose, sharper now, filled with anger, as if shouting at ghosts only she could see. Her body trembled, her breaths quick, and at last she fell silent, collapsing against the tree. Tears spilled down her cheeks, bright against her glowing skin. The human did not move closer, but his eyes softened, his voice steady. You are not nothing, he whispered, though she could not know the words. The tone carried the weight. The girl pressed her face into her arms, her shoulders shaking. Her family's words echoed in her mind, weak, burdened, broken. They had stripped her of everything, even the right to believe in herself. But this human, a stranger, spoke with a voice that carried no mockery, only patience. She lifted her head. Slowly, eyes red and shimmering, her lips parted, and for the first time she tried his word in his own tongue. Strong, she whispered, clumsy but clear. The human nodded once, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She stared at him, confusion and disbelief in her heart, but also a warmth she had never felt. The hours stretched on, and she began to speak. Again, her words softer, halting, but determined. She told her story not in sentences he could understand, but in fragments he pieced together. She pointed at her chest, then at the horizon, then pressed her palms against her knees. He saw in her eyes the moment she was abandoned, the moment her family turned their backs, the shame of being called useless, the agony of being left with nothing. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. Every word was like a wound reopening, yet she forced them out. She needed him to know. Even if he did not understand, her story was not just about being left behind. It was about being erased. When her words broke into silence, the forest seemed to listen with her. The human sat across from her, his hands resting calmly on his knees. Then he leaned forward, his voice steady, his tone filled with quiet strength. You are not broken, he said. She tilted her head, not catching the meaning, but the softness in his voice struck her deeper than the words. For the first time since being abandoned, she felt her chest lighten. The weight of silence was no longer hers alone. The human carried a piece of it simply by listening. She wiped her tears with trembling fingers, her lips parting again to repeat the word that had begun to anchor her. Strong. The human nodded once more, his gaze unwavering. He reached out slowly, setting his hand near hers but not touching, leaving the choice to her. She hesitated, then placed her hand on her silver skin glowing faintly against his scarred palm. It was a fragile gesture, but it carried the force of her whole heart. That night, when the stars burned bright above the ruins, the girl lay close to the fire, whispering to herself. Her story had been told, not fully, not in detail, but enough. She had released it into the world, no longer trapped inside her chest. Her eyes closed with a peace she had not known for years, and as sleep claimed her, she whispered the word one last time, strong. The human rose with the first light of morning, the forest still damp with dew. He tightened the straps on his worn armor and stepped outside the broken shelter. The alien girl stirred moments later, sitting up slowly, her hair tangled, her silver eyes heavy with sleep. She rubbed her arms against the chill and glanced at him, unsure if she should follow. He lifted his stick from the ground and held it out to her. "Come," he said in his steady voice. She tilted her head, frowning. But when he repeated the gesture, she pushed herself to her feet. Her steps were weak, yet there was no hesitation, not like before. The clearing was quiet except for the soft crunch of soil underfoot. The human stood in the center, his stance firm, his staff raised. He showed her the motion feet apart, knees bent, strike forward. At first she only stared, her arms crossed, her pride whispering that it was useless. But when he held the staff out again, she took it, her hands trembling but steady. Her first swing was clumsy, the stick slipping from her grip. Heat rushed to her cheeks, her pride screamed with shame. But instead of laughing, the human simply handed it back, his voice calm. Again, she tried once more, and then again. Stumbling, striking, falling, rising, every failure felt heavy. But every time he returned the staff to her hands, he repeated the same word, strong. She hated it at first, shaking her head, shouting in her own tongue that she was nothing. But the human never argued, never raised his voice. He simply repeated, strong. Hours passed, her body aching, sweat covering her skin. Yet something shifted in her heart. Every strike she made felt less like weakness and more like effort. She began to see the fire in her arms, the weight in her legs, the steady rhythm of breath in her chest. For the first time, she felt the faint whisper of strength. By midday, she collapsed to the ground, panting hard. The human crouched beside her, offering water. She drank quickly, then stared at him with a mix of exhaustion and wonder. Her lips parted, and in his language, broken but clear, she said, "I try." His eyes softened, his faint smile giving her the answer without words. "Yes, try," he said quietly. Her chest tightened, a warmth rising within her, unfamiliar but powerful. That evening he showed her how to build a fire on her own. She fumbled with the stones, frustration bubbling in her throat, but his calm gestures guided her hands, patient as ever. When the spark finally caught and the flames rose, her eyes widened in shock. She laughed, the sound light and sharp. Surprising even herself, the human looked at her, his expression unchanged but his eyes gleaming with quiet pride. She covered her mouth quickly, embarrassed, but the sound lingered between them. It was not the laugh of mockery she had known before. It was her own, free and real. Over the next days, she learned more how to listen for the footsteps of animals, how to carry herself with balance, how to use her voice without fear. Every small victory lit something brighter inside her. Her pride no longer came from pretending she was strong, but from seeing herself become stronger. The human never praised her with many words, but his steady presence was enough. One night, as the fire burned low, she sat closer than ever before. Her silver eyes reflected the flames, her voice quiet but firm. "I not broken," she whispered in his tongue, her accent heavy but her meaning clear. The human looked at her, his voice calm, steady, certain. "No, not broken." Her throat tightened. Her hands curled into fists, and she nodded slowly. For the first time she believed the words, even if only a little. Her story was still filled with pain, but now it carried something more. It carried hope, fragile but alive. She lay down that night, her body aching, her spirit trembling, but her lips moved once more, repeating the word she had once rejected, strong. And for the first time, the word did not feel like his gift to her. It felt like her own.